President, it is critically important to the country and to my state of Wisconsin that we do everything we can to preserve an American auto manufacturing industry. The domestic auto industry has been vital to the economic development of Wisconsin for much of the last century. But that industry is undergoing a rapid restructuring right now, and I'm very concerned about how this restructuring will affect communities in Wisconsin. Mr. President, we need an American auto industry, but it can't be American in name only. American jobs must be protected. Unfortunately, the auto restructuring plans that have been put forward contain proposals that ship jobs overseas. Now, that's not acceptable to me or to my constituents. The taxpayer dollars that are propping up the industry should be used to preserve family-supporting jobs in Wisconsin and around the country. Now, my state of Wisconsin has been hard hit by the troubles in the auto industry over the past year. There are two major auto plants located in my state, a General Motors plant in my hometown of Janesville, and a Chrysler engine plant in Kenosha. In addition, there are a dozen of companies in Wisconsin that support these two plants, including supply companies and car dealers. Both the Janesville and Kenosha plants have received grim news from GM and Chrysler over the past year, including last year's announcement that production would cease at the GM Janesville plant and this week's statement that the Kenosha engine plant would close at the end of 2010. The Wisconsin community, including workers, economic development officials, technical colleges, workforce development groups, Governor Doyle, the federal congressional delegation, and others have mobilized to assist these communities in the larger region in responding to this troubling news from both GM and Chrysler. Mr. President, I supported carving out some of the Wall Street bailout funds to help U.S. automakers, because unlike the money heading to Wall Street firms, the money provided to the automakers actually had a chance of preserving essential jobs in the United States. But that doesn't mean we should give auto companies a blank check, which is why I said that any federal assistance provided to the automakers should come with requirements that the industry reform itself, including producing more fuel-efficient cars that Americans are now demanding. And when Congress failed to pass legislation to provide federal funds to the auto industry, I applauded then-President Bush for stepping in and using some of the Wall Street bailout money to help the auto industry, while also requiring that the companies submit restructuring plans. So, Mr. President, frankly, I am appalled that the automakers that receive taxpayer assistance are not prioritizing the retention of American jobs, including jobs in Wisconsin. Over the past several months, I've heard concerns from the workers at the Chrysler Kenosha engine plant that work that Chrysler had promised to assign to the Kenosha plant might no longer actually be assigned to the Kenosha plant. At the same time, Kenosha's workforce told me that the same work would likely continue as scheduled at a plant in Mexico. So in response to these concerns, I led a letter in early April, co-signed by Senator Cole and Representative Ryan, Representative Moore, to Secretary Geithner and the National Economic Council Director Larry Summers. The letter urged the administration to consider including a priority for saving auto manufacturing jobs in the United States as the administration worked with auto companies to craft restructuring plans. I received a response from Secretary Geithner that said it was the administration's hope that any Chrysler restructuring deal, quote, will help ensure that we retain as many Chrysler jobs as possible in Wisconsin. Now, despite this assurance, the Kenosha community found out through the media last week that, in fact, no Chrysler jobs would be retained at the Kenosha engine plant. Instead, the Kenosha community was informed that the Kenosha plant would close by the end of 2010, while a Mexican plant slated to build the same product that has been promised to the Kenosha facility would remain open. This news, which was not heard directly from the company itself, outraged the Kenosha community and other Wisconsinites who feel that their tax dollars should not be used to save jobs overseas, but should instead be used to save jobs in the United States and in Wisconsin, and rightly so. The federal delegation, state and local officials, and the Kenosha workforce are united in working together to try to persuade the administration and Chrysler to reconsider this terrible decision. I understand, Mr. President, that tough decisions need to be made as these companies restructure themselves. But both Chrysler and GM have received billions of American taxpayer dollars since December, and the companies, as well as the administration, need to take steps to help ensure that those taxpayer dollars are being utilized for the purpose for which they were intended. And, Mr. President, that is to save American jobs. American jobs. If Chrysler is going to close the Kenosha plant as well as other domestic plants while keeping its overseas facilities open, then we need to think seriously about whether it is in the interest of the American taxpayers to provide continued financial assistance to the company. Now, Mr. President, there may still be some hope for the Chrysler engine plant in Kenosha and the General Motors assembly plant in Janesville and other American plants if the administration steps up. My hometown, the Janesville community, is waiting to hear whether or not the incentive package as presented to GM will be accepted, and the Kenosha community is waiting to hear whether Chrysler's decision to close the Kenosha plant will be reconsidered. Over the years, Mr. President, both the Kenosha and Janesville workers have been commended for their productivity, their creativity, and their willingness to negotiate fairly with the management at each plant. And I know firsthand that both communities are great locations for retooled auto companies to thrive in the future. The first priority of any company receiving federal taxpayer assistance should be to preserve jobs within the United States. And so I call upon the administration and Chrysler and GM to re-examine their restructuring plans to make the preservation of U.S. jobs the top priority of these plans. I will continue to do all I can to support Wisconsin's workers and local communities in their efforts both to respond to these decisions and to ensure that these auto companies prioritize saving auto manufacturing jobs in Wisconsin as the restructuring process moves forward in the coming days and weeks. I thank the President, and I yield the floor